reference to. All right, fantastic. Well, welcome to the April Chicago Marketo Users Group. Find your happy place API. Today we are joined by Jason Raisleger. So we are very excited for today's session. A couple of quick housekeeping items before we get started. As a reminder, mugs are intended to be a safe space for users to be able to talk about different use cases. So please don't take any information that is shared from a use case perspective outside of this group. We also ask that you not reach out or contact users about their particular use cases without their consent. So this is not a place for scraping names for your email list type of thing. So we're excited to be able to have this as a place where we can all share and learn from each other. Now, as I mentioned, this is being recorded. If you do not want to take part in the recording, you're always welcome to watch on demand afterward. If you have any questions about that, you can reach out to me via Slack or LinkedIn or the Adobe advocacy team. Couple of quick announcements for updates, opportunities. We've got 3 new Marketo Engage certifications. A few of you may have seen at the end of the year last year, the Marketo Certified Expert exam was updated. A new addition was made this year in February, which is the formerly MCSA, the Marketo Certified Solutions Architect, is now available to people not just at partners or consultants, but to anyone who has 5 years of experience or more and has passed the current Certified Expert exam. So if you do have one that's up for renewal, you'll need to pass the new one for the MCE before you can take the MCSA. But that is one to keep an eye out on if you're interested in. It's a little more case study based than some of the other exams, but that's now available for anyone who's interested. If you're looking for a new role, hey, the market's still looking good out there. We've got a couple of great roles that are Chicagoland, Chicago suburbs, as well as a few remote roles from folks within our team. Call out here, Donor Drive is one of my teams, so shameless plug on that one. We've got a demand gen role and an ABM role over there that'll work in my new instance. Andy's team at Revenue Pulse is hiring marketing automation consultants. And over at Jason's team, we were looking for a performance marketing operations manager working on the Marketo team over there. So a lot of different things going on over there. If you are looking for something, feel free to ping me. I'm happy to keep that as a private search too, and keep my ear to the ground for you if there's anything that I see. One other announcement I wanted to add, we are joined on here today by Christiane Rhodes. I wanted to say congratulations to her, one of the newest Marketo champions out of our Chicago users group. So congratulations to Christiane. In addition, the Marketo users group for the Chicago area, Andy Carone, our co-lead here, is now out on maternity leave for the next couple of months. So congratulations to her. If you do have any questions, suggestions, ideas for topics or speakers that you'd like to see, please reach out to me and I'm happy to see what we can make happen. And as we dive in today's session, very, very excited to welcome Jason, former consultant from Marketo, who has now moved in-house as the marketing solutions architect at Trimble. We know him for his deep expertise and technical knowledge in the API space and a little bit of the fun twist that we get from the MOPS memes. So very excited to have you. Jason, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and very happy to be here. This is a great turnout. So happy to talk about this. I love talking about APIs. When I was at Marketo, and the person that I was working with, he actually came from Marketo support. And I was just kind of telling him about some of the things I was doing on a day-to-day basis. And he'd be like, well, why aren't you using the API for that? I'm like, well, I don't know how. So once he opened that door for me, I just saw Marketo in a whole different way and realized that much of what I did on a daily basis could really be automated. So I'm going to share that with you today. And as we pointed out, I don't know if you saw the some of the material for this, but this is really for the everyday user too, because that's what I was when I started doing this. So you should know that you can take what you learned today and expand upon it if you know Python and those types of things. But right now, this is just going to be for someone who's an everyday user that wants to do their job a little bit more efficiently and especially reduce those mundane tasks. So with that, I'm going to share my screen in just a minute. I'll have a few slides, but most of what I'll be doing is actually showing you via screen share. So. All right, so we're going to be going down a rabbit hole here. So again, kind of just reiterating what I said is to save you time, eliminate manual tasks and make your life better. As you know, as I think we're all aware, jobs are in much demand right now, and sometimes that means, unfortunately, that we're all a little bit strapped for time. So hopefully, this will allow you to free up some of that time and really concentrate on more things that require your brain instead of just doing, again, very menial tasks over and over again. So this link will be your best friend. I'll open this right here. This is going to give you anything you need to know about making the API calls that we're doing today. There's actually over 300 different API calls, so we're only going to be touching a very small fraction. But I think after you see, the first couple examples, you'll kind of get the gist of how they're all set up. So, you come in here. There's a link for just assets, and as you can see, you can click on things like emails, and this will show you all of the API calls related to emails. And then there's also one for email templates and landing page content. So it gets very granular, which is great. And then you can see that most of what we're going to have here is either a get or a post. I would say if you haven't done this before and you're just getting started, kind of focus on using the gets, because as the name implies, you're just getting information. You aren't actually changing anything in Marketo. Where the post, you could actually change things. So I would recommend just using the gets as we get started here. But just so you know, that's primarily what you'll see. And I'll show you in Postman, which is a free tool that I use that you can use too, on how these look. So let me go back. All right, so I assume most of the people on the call know this, but in order to use the APIs, you just need to have someone with an API-only user role. And generally, you want to set up a separate launch point service for Postman, which is something you do. It just helps you keep track of where the calls are coming from. So you aren't, technically, you could loop them in with a different service you're already using, but wouldn't recommend it. So just to create your own launch point service, I have a service that's just called Postman. And from that, you'll get the client ID, the client secret, and then also you'll be able to get your token that way too, which you'll need for Postman to make sure they know that you're authenticated to do this. Some things to keep in mind with the API is there are some limits. So the default limit on calls per day is 50,000. You may have more if you've purchased more, but that's the limit. So one thing that we'll see, or my next bullet point there, is to batch jobs whenever possible. And I'll show you that, especially when we're extracting things like programs and forms. If you want to do that, if you're doing an audit and you want to get all the programs in your instance, it could be 4,000, maybe more. If you did that one by one, that'd be 4,000 calls. However, in using the API, you can batch it in sizes of 200. So it'd be down to 20 calls essentially. So quite a difference there. So I'll show you how we can do that. And then also you can't have more than 100 calls per 20 seconds. And that's across all of your different API users. You may think, well, I'm just making this call. I won't go over 120 seconds. But again, if you have a data cleansing service that's making an API call and an event that's making an API call, you could go over that. So I'll show you some ways to try to mitigate the chances of that happening as well. And then also no more than 10 concurrent API calls. So these are the tools that I'll be showing you today, and there's just links in here. So after this is done, you can click on the links, but also just show you. And then getting started with Postman. So as I'll show you in just a second, Postman is really consists of workspaces and collections, and that's where you actually store the requests. And then you need to authorize each call, and there's a field to do that. So I'll show you. And just so you know, I have a variable in my URL, but all of your requests will look like this. You'll just have to replace your Munchkin code with whatever is in here. Again, mine will just be a variable, so you won't actually see the Munchkin code, but that's how that works. So up here, right where it says Munchkin, you would just put your Munchkin code in there. And then here is where you'll paste your bearer token, your authentication token. And some of what we'll do is today is to get a list of all your forms. Let's say kind of like where you might be doing an audit for your instance. We're going to update program names, create tokens, mass approve landing pages, and deactivate smart campaigns. So I'm going to stop sharing just for a second while I change screens. Any questions before I get started? Okay, just give me 1 second. All right. So, all right, hopefully you can see Postman here. So as we can see, this is the, I'm in just my, like all my Marketo user group workspace. And then this is my collection. So Marketo is my collection. And these are all the different API calls that they are put into different folders. So I just created one here that's called Playground, which will just have the ones that I'm using today. But if I click on here, we'll see that here is the call, and I'm going to be switching back and forth between this and the doc. So the one that I'm using right now is just the forms endpoint, and I'm going to be getting all forms. So as we go through here, I know that get is always in blue, so I'll see get forms. So now when you look at my URL, we can see that it's marketorest.com/rest/asset/v1 forms.json. And now you'll see that there's a couple parameters on the end, max return, which is 200. The default is actually 20. So if you don't put anything into that, it's going to get 20 assets at a time. Although to be most efficient, I want that to be 200. And also we have an offset of 0. So you'll need to increase that by 200 for each time. So again, let's just make it easy and say we have 600 forms. We'll run it once, then I'll change the offset to 200. We'll run it again. I'll change the offset to 400. We'll run it again. And then when I run it a third time, it'll say no more assets are found, because that'll get through the 600s. So I'll show you that in just a second. But I also want to show you, let's say you don't want to do this and you just want to make it easier. Jet Castleline actually has a tool called Data Kettle that I want to show you too, where you can put in your Munchkin and your access token, and then choose any of these, and you'll get a full list of them as well. So if you don't want to go the Postman route, but you still want to be able to get all of your assets, this is a tool you can use too. But for today, we're actually going to use Postman. So this first one that I'm going to do is this get forms. I'm going to get all of the forms in our instance, and I'll make this initial call. And I should put in here that you can see here the type is bearer token, and then this is a variable, but normally you paste your Munchkin or your authorization token right in here. All right, so you can see I got my result here, success true. That's wonderful. Not the easiest to read though, but it is. We can see that I'm getting a whole bunch of information here that could potentially be pretty helpful in things that I want to do. So one thing I can do, I can copy this, and then I'll come to a different tool, which is one of the links in the slides, where you can paste this in. And we'll see that it actually generates your JSON in a really nice way to read and copy to clipboard. And I'm just going to come here and I'll paste this in. come all the way down. I'm going to change this to 200. So now we're going to get the next 200. Copy that. Yep, I didn't go to my tool. And we'll try it one more time. Okay, so we can see no assets are found. So somewhere between 200 and 400 is how many that we actually have. So now that I have it here, it still looks kind of messy, but we'll change that in a second, because once we do the data and the split text to columns, we'll see, and I'll actually remove these two columns because those were for the main call. But now I can see the ID of the form, the name, the description, if there is one, when it's created, the status. And we can do this for a whole bunch of different assets, forms, landing pages, programs. So again, if you're doing something like an audit and you just want to see how many, all the things that you have going on that may have been created over time that you aren't even sure about, this is a great way to do that. And just so you know, you can see that this is essentially what you're getting out of data Kettle too. So it's all, good news is it's all matching up very closely. So any questions on that? Okay. Next thing that I'll be doing then is going to actually, I'll be getting programs, but I want to talk about programs in a little bit because I'm going to have a filter on here where I only want to get programs within a folder. So let me go here. So I could do what I just did and get every program in our instance, but I just want to get the ones in the JSON-R folder. And this is something that's a little bit quirky because if you go to a program, you can see that the ID is 2375. However, folders don't work that way. Folders will have an ID of 4438, but that's not actually the folder as far as the API goes. So I'm going to show you how to get that information. And this one I'm doing is a get folder by name endpoint. And on here, we can see I just put in the folder name. And then one thing you may see if you start going through more of these endpoints is that folder can really mean an actual folder, or a folder can actually mean a program. So sometimes you have to specify what it is. So here you'll see that the name is JSON-R and that the folder type is folder, because the folder type could be program. So I would say this is probably one of the more confusing parts of making API calls, but I think once you understand kind of how this works, it'll make more sense. So I'm going to send that, and we'll see that here, the actual ID is 5181. And this is a really useful endpoint to use because sometimes you'll want to see what the parent folder is. So if I go back to here, I can see that's the marketing training folder, and that has an ID of 4388. So again, helpful to, especially as you're going through your instance, to be able to find out where this is. So now that I know that I really want to look at all of my programs that are in 5188, I can use that in my next call, which is to get programs. So on here, I'm now using my my get programs endpoint. And I apologize, there's going to be quite a bit of back and forth switching, but I want to show you how to read the documentation too, because that's something that I struggled with getting started. So if we come here, and what I want to do is get programs, because I don't know the IDs. I could use this if I knew the IDs, but right now I just know the folder of the programs that I want to get data from. So I'll open this, and you'll see that there's a whole bunch of notes in here, but really the most important ones are at the bottom here, and it'll list the parameters that you can use. And sometimes they're required, sometimes they aren't. So as we see this max return, this was something I was talking about where the default is 20, the max is 200, something you can put on the end of the call. Same thing with the offset that we just saw on the form. On here, we could also use the earliest updated at and last updated at. So if you know that something hopefully didn't go wrong, but something went wrong with the programs before last month or something, you could put in that earliest updated and last updated at to help you narrow that down. But the one that I really want to work on here is this filter type. And I'm looking for the folder ID. So when I come back to Postman, we'll see I still have my max return, and I could actually, I know that there's not that many, but I can put that back to 200. And here I have the filter type of folder ID, and then the filter value of 5181, which came from that previous call.
Jason, we've got a couple of quick questions too after this
Sure.
call here.
Oh, okay. I'll just show you that. So now it just got only those programs, even though we have the max return of 200. Luckily, we didn't get more than the ones that are actually in that folder. So.
Question on the max return. Just to confirm, if we know there are only 50 assets, would we then want to set the max return to 50, or does it not matter?
Tell you the truth, I don't. I've always set it to 200 to cover it. I would assume there's probably some reason why the default is 20. I guess I don't know the answer on that, to be quite honest. I've always just used 200 to make sure that I get all of them that I need, and then once I just get to the end, I stop calling them. So, I mean, if you know for sure that there's 50, I would probably. It probably doesn't hurt to do that. It's just if you're going to be exporting everything from your database, I would leave it at 200.
Okay. And the other question was, in addition to the created and modified date, are you able to pull who created or modified assets?
So let me actually, 1 second. Not on that call itself. There is a, I don't think it would actually be on here. User management. It doesn't look like it, but again, I'm not familiar with all of them. It's not a parameter on that get programs call. So there may be. I'd have to look through to see if there's one. I would think not, because there's not anything in the user management role, which is I think what it would be under. So you'd probably still have to use the audit trail for that.
Okay. And the one more question on the 200, using 200 as the max is limited by the calls per 20 seconds limit, correct?
Well, so that would be one call though. So yeah, essentially you don't have to, like 200 calls isn't going to go over the 100 in 20 seconds because it's just one call. So no matter if you've set your max return at 10, 100 or 200, that's one call. So that would count as one of your 100 calls within 20 seconds.
Okay, great.
All right, so going back to for the sake of efficiency, I posted the names of these already in a spreadsheet just so we can see what we're doing here. So if you'll see, I have a whole bunch of mixtures of naming conventions, which I'm sure is not unique to me. You probably have a lot going on in your instance. So, it may seem like, wow, it's a really big project to do. And, with so much going on, is it top priority? It's not, but there's actually a quick way to fix this. So as we'll see on my sheet here, I have the ID of the program, which, if you're going to be working with the API, everything is IDs. So the more that you can have, the better, and have those documented. So we have the name, but then I also have a column here for what the new name should be. So we'll see that these are all now standard naming conventions. We have the year, the quarter, the channel, the specific indicator, and then the program ID. And also we'll be adding descriptions. So this is something I know even from my consulting days, not a lot of, seems like not a lot of companies actually take advantage of having that in there. But again, this is a quick way to update that. So when we'll come in here, I have a new call called update program metadata. And again, I'll go back to my endpoint reference. And here we want to update the program ID. So as we come down here, we'll see that here it has a path parameter, just meaning that it's within the before the .json, so not like a parameter on the end. And here's everything that you could have. So let's say even that you wanted to add costs to a program, you can do that via the API, which is just right here. You can use end dates if it's an event, but really what I'm going to be doing is just updating the name and then updating the description. But here's everything that you can use. So just because this is only what I'm using doesn't mean that's what we're restricted to. In fact, you can do tags and that type of thing too. So this is really helpful anytime you want to, if you're kind of changing the way you're going about your instance, being able to do this is going to save you a ton of time. So, and you may think, okay, well, I still have to go through, this doesn't have a batch of 200 or anything like that. So I still have to go through one by one, but there's actually a really cool tool within Postman itself where we can take values from a CSV and run them through automatically. So one thing that I want to point out here is we'll see that there's a variable here called ID, and it's saying it's unresolved, but it will be resolved, so we don't have to worry about that. There's one, and actually this variable is wrong, so let me fix that real quick. The variable should match up with your column headers in the CSV. So this is going to be new name, and then new description. So when I come in here, so now reading what this API call is saying is find this program ID, give it this new name, and give it this new description. So I'm going to save that. And now if I go all the way up here to my collection and click on that, we'll see that there's this button that's called run. We're going to use that. I'm going to find the call that I want to make, which is all the way down here. It's update program metadata. I'm going to just uncheck those. And I didn't actually download my file yet, so let me do that. I'm going to download it as a CSV. And here is the delay. So we talked about number of calls within 20 seconds, 100 calls within 20 seconds. For the sake of safety, so this is in milliseconds. So obviously 250 would be 4 calls in a second. I always set it to 300 just in case there's additional calls going through. So this is going to wait 300 milliseconds between calls, which will help you not hit that limit. And then and you'll see when I selected this file, it automatically found how many iterations there are. So I didn't need to put that in. You can see that there's 5 of them in here. So now I'm just going to run that. And now when I come back here, we can see everything has already, we now have new names. So this is my purchased, even though we told them list import purchased, even though we told them not to program. We also have, we have the never use periods and naming conventions as the description. So, and I did this with programs. We can do this with any asset. So this is where it gets really powerful. And even you can create programs to the API too. So that's a separate endpoint up here to create a program. And so the more that you can just kind of get comfortable doing these types of things, the more you'll see how they all kind of relate to each other. They'll start to see that a lot of these parameters are really the same no matter which endpoint you're using. So here you just need to know, the type of channel you want to do, but you can really start doing more of these things in a programmatic way, and spend maybe less of your time within Marketo itself. Still obviously have to go in there to do things like create smart lists and like the action steps for a smart campaign. But even once you have that, you can clone smart campaigns and pretty efficiently. So, and there's also one other, so in addition to the asset and lead database up here under endpoint reference, you can also go down here, and it says assets again. I wish there was a better way of separating this because it's kind of hard to explain. But if you click down here, you can see all of these areas again. So if I click into programs and I want to see some examples, for instance, we just did create an update. We can see like what that parameter will look like. So if you're ever running into an issue where you're getting an error, and even though you think you followed it correctly based on what you saw in the other asset part, you can come down here, and this will generally give you more information on what that particular call will do, because some of them are just a little bit different. So even like I was talking about the folder versus program thing before. Sometimes, let me go back to that call that I made. I think it was this one. So here it says filter type folder ID, filter values 5181. Sometimes it's just folder type equals, and then you have to put type folder, comma, ID of what it is. So that's, again, probably the toughest thing to get used to, is just to see how to make the correct call. But there's a lot of documentation. So generally, if you look in one of those two sections, either in the asset up here or assets down here, you'll be able to find what you're looking for.
Jason, we've got a couple other questions that have come in.
Sure.
When you update a name, does it update everywhere it is used?
So yeah, you don't have to worry about it like breaking with anything, because it's actually linked by the ID. So I mean, unless you'd have something outside of Marketo that's looking for that name, but even, you know, most of your integrations are going to be based on IDs. So if there's more specifics to that question, happy to discuss. But if the concern is, will it break anything? No, because it's already linked by ID.
The next one, can you use this to run a mass activity export of filled out form, especially for embedded forms, since those can only be pulled one by one in Marketo?
So just to get people that filled out a specific form?
I believe so. Thaddeus, is that correct? All forms.
Okay, so there's a couple different things we can do. So there's the activities endpoint up here where you can get activities by activity type. So again, I think the answer is yes, but I'm looking for a little bit more information. So getting all the form fills essentially, right?
Yes, for a period of time. So say for a week, for example.
Yep, and you can get it within, and you can also do it, you can use the bulk endpoint for that too. So we have the bulk activities export, where you can get that 31 days at a time. And actually, let me actually go back into here. So this would be under the lead database. So we were in asset before. This is lead database. Here you can have the activities. And this one would be, is it activities by get activity? So here you do the get activities. You'd have to have the activity type ID. So I know filled out form is an activity type of 2. And you can use the get activity type endpoint to find out which activity type has which ID. But you could do this, and then you'll get, even if you wanted to have, like if you had people on a list and you just wanted to get people on that list that filled out a form, you can do that. That's a parameter in here. So yes, the long answer is, or the short answer is yes. The long answer is you can do it, but you'll have to kind of decide which batch size and what parameters you want to put in place. So that's not something you would use the asset API endpoints for. It would be on the lead then.
Great. And then the other one was a setup question. How are you able to use tokens on your call to identify the Munchkin ID for your instance?
I'd assume you're talking about right here.
I believe so.
Okay, so that's you can
Correct,
have.
Yes.
I'll just see here. So if you it's something within Postman itself, so it's not a token. In Marketo terms, it's a variable in Postman terms. So I just have that stored here. This is called an environment. So I just have one set up where I have my bearer token already stored in here and my Munchkin already in here. So when you see this Munchkin token, it's actually referring to this right here in my environment in Postman. So it's not necessarily a Marketo token, just a different variable. So you don't need, so I could easily, and maybe to cut down on confusion, I'll come back here and do this one. Post in, paste that in. 1 second. Let me try that again. There we go. So we can see now I just hard coded it in essentially, but the reason that I have that set up like that is because I go through different instances. So I can just change the environment and so if let's say you're in a sandbox, you could have that as one environment and production as another one. So that's all essentially, that's all it is it's just putting my Munchkin code in there. All right, next thing I'll do is I'm going to approve the draft of a landing page. Let's come in here. Gotta remember where I put this. All right, so in here I have a whole bunch of landing pages, and these probably wouldn't always be in one program. They're probably in different programs. But let's say you're using a global form, and of course you make an update, you add a field. All right, so now we're approving that and we're closing, which is great, but now we have all of these landing pages to reapprove. I see Ellie, who's a fellow colleague of mine, is on the call, and this was something we had a client where we actually had to do this. And this is before I knew how to use the API, so this was quite a long process. But now we can do this really quickly. So for the sake of time, I already stored the IDs of these landing pages, but just so you can see, if I click on here, so 7142. So I'm just going to come up here, and again, I'm going to, first of all, I always forget to actually download the CSV, which is very important. So I'm downloading that, and now, again, I'm going to the approved landing page draft. So I need to go up here, click run. Find my call, approved landing page draft. I'll get this CSV file. It already has 13, even though there's not 13, I have some extra IDs on there, which is no problem. Change this to 300. And now we'll see that they're turning green right before our eyes, which is a beautiful thing. So you no longer have to be worried about making updates to forms and thinking that they'll be, you'll have a ton of landing pages to go back and reapprove. You can get those easily enough through the API. I think there's actually a forms used by endpoint, if I recall, where you could see all of the assets that are, forms used by. So you can see all of the landing pages that are actually being used by that form, export those to a spreadsheet, and then just when they're done, run them right through Postman, and you'll be done in a matter of minutes. So.
Question on that, is it possible to use the ID of the form and reference the landing pages that use that form so that you don't have to have the IDs of the landing page?
No, you'd have to, I mean, that's basically why you use the get form used by. So you can't just say, go to this form and update the landing page, but you can, you can kind of do that. You just have to make 2 separate calls. So short answer, no, but it's pretty simple just to do the forms used by and then just update it from there.
Great.
All right. Another thing is activating tokens. or I'm sorry, not activating tokens, but smart campaigns. So again, this is one of the things I did when I was a consultant too, is for their quarterly campaign cleanup, they had a lot of campaigns that they actually wanted to keep active, even though there hadn't been activity in the past. I forget what it is, 6 months. So one of my jobs was to go through and turn them back on after they got deactivated. So quick way to do that here, we'll see that I have all of these smart campaigns that I just want to turn on. So again, I have those up here in my smart campaign list. Download that as a CSV. Go back to my runner. And activate. And come back here and we'll see them turning on. So, this is nice too if you build out a program and you want to have all of them set, but not wait to turn them on until the exact day that something's launching. This is a great way to do that without having to turn them on all manually. Just make sure that as you create them, you store the ID somewhere, and then again run this, and they'll be done in under a minute. Or if something's going wrong, conversely, you could also use this to turn them off. There's also a deactivate smart campaign ID. All right, and then one last thing that I'll show, and we'll see if there's any additional questions, is tokens. So one of the things that I find is that most of the time we'll get tokens for a program through some of the marketing teams in a spreadsheet, which then we have to copy and paste, which this is a perfect use of why you'd want to use Postman instead, because this is really what it's built for. So let's come up here. We'll go down to this tokens. So you can get all the tokens by a folder ID, but you can also create them. And when we say create, it means create or update. So even like inherited tokens, if you would give a token the same name in that program, it's going to overwrite it. So that's why it's really create or update. So we'll see here that right now, none of my programs have, they're all inherited tokens. There's no top level or local tokens, I should say. But we'll change that here. So if I come back here, we'll see that here I have a variable of PRG for program, which is listing these all out. I have my token name, which will get appended with my, obviously, token type, and the token value. So I'm going to download this. And now in my create token, we'll see that here's that PRG. So it's matching the header, token name, token type, and token value. So for one more time, I'm going to go back up to our runner. Select all of those. And you don't need to have, obviously, all, I have every endpoint there is. If you're only using some of them, I would only put what you need in there. It'll save you hassle of going through all these. I'm going to choose the create token endpoint. Select my file. I can see that there's 30 iterations on there. That looks good to me. We'll run this. And we'll come back here. Nope, not that one yet. So here I can see that it's created my tokens for me. So if you get a spreadsheet, you could do some things where you could have one column. You could even hide this and just have them fill out something that would make more sense to them as to what the title is, if you can think of where it's going to go on your assets in Marketo, and then just create the tokens based off of that. That way they're filling it out for you. You don't have to do any of the copy and paste work. And it'll just add it in there. Same thing for updating. So let's say that you're cloning a program, and obviously events in particular. Normally, especially if we get back into in-person events here, you have to change the location, change the date. You can do that by clicking here, but you can also just get a spreadsheet and run these through, and it'll update them as well. So really, as you get more comfortable with the API, you can clone a program, update the tokens, update any of the names you want in there, all via the API. And even I just realized one thing that I skipped over earlier is there's just a whole lot more in here. Like even on landing pages, there's an update metadata endpoint where, let's say that you've had some new tracking tags that you wanted to put into the head of your landing pages. You can actually do that via the API. So again, you don't have to go into every single one. Or if you want to change, say you wanted to change all the titles of the pages because there's a new initiative of some kind, you can use the API for that. So there's just a ton of potential in here. That's way too much for an hour-long discussion. So I'm just hoping that what I showed you kind of gave you an idea of what's possible, because I think there's just a ton of potential here. And with that, I'm happy to expand on anything I've already shown, or if there's specific examples, we can get into that too.
We have a question on smart campaigns. What if I want a list of all the active smart campaigns in my instance? Can I pull this out with the names and the links to those campaigns in Marketo? When trying to export from Campaign Inspector, it's mega messy.
So let me check. So we could do, let me see if, oh, that's not the right one. That's a post. Get smart campaigns. So it looks like, let me, it looks like, yes. So I would have to play around with this, but it looks like is active is actually a value we could put in our parameter. So let me get down here, get smart campaigns. I'm going to steal this. Let's see if this works. And then if this works, I will add the additional value of is active. Actually, I didn't want to do that either. So actually, this is a good thing too. So now I'll show you. Here we actually wanted to go by program ID, which is 2375. And let me just look at the documentation. Okay. So this one's a little different. So I'm glad this happened. So I think we have folder equal, and here I have to put it in a, so let me see, there's a couple different ways to, okay, so. Yeah, I would have to, so it looks like it is possible, yes. So sometimes even I have to play around with these a little bit. Here's going back to the thing where the folder and program is always a little bit different. But here I'd have to call the program, but it does have a parameter for is active. So yes, you can sort just by smart campaigns that are active and export those. Any other questions?
Raj says, great presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, we'll open this up for questions. We've got the space open through the top of the hour. So if you've got particular use cases, Joel, to get your hands on the recording, if you registered for this session through the mugs.marketo.com website, this session will be emailed out to all registrants for today's session.
And actually, it's a person that asked it is still on. I got it now. So it's actually folder equals type of program, comma ID of 2375. So now here, I'm just going to deactivate a few of these. And I'll just deactivate this one. And then I'll add the is active. So let's see, SCO1 and SCO3. So it skipped over my second one, which is expected, and over my seventh one, which I also turned off. So yeah, you can use this just to get the active ones. Anything else? All right. Well, I will still obviously stick around for a little bit if anyone has questions, but otherwise, I'm glad everyone could join.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. As soon as this has processed, this recording, I will send it out so that you'll have a copy along with the slides that Jason shared today and some of the links to the developer's site, Postman, Kettle, some of those other hyperlinks that were shared in the deck as well. Jason, thank you so much for joining. This was absolutely fantastic. I know a lot of us, you'll have to go through the chat, a lot of heads exploding over this one, but definitely something that will be very impactful for everyone on this call. So thank you again, everyone else. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you all again soon and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks.